Haga was horrified to discover that the girl who was supposed to have died was appearing again. He had witnessed her death with his own eyes, and even the body was completely incinerated. If the girl had turned into ashes, then who was this living person in front of him? This is currently the biggest plot twist in the July new anime series, and its truth will surely shock you. The girl, Nicola, was born in a secluded rural village. Although life was not wealthy, it was stable enough every day. However, the mundane daily life changed that day. The sky gradually darkened, and vibrations kept coming from the distance. By the time Nicola regained her senses, what appeared before her were two gigantic dragons. These were originally mild-mannered tribes that roamed the deep mountains, but for some reason, they had moved near the village. Worse still, the originally gentle Homo dragons began attacking humans. The country girl had never seen such a grand scene and was so frightened that she couldn't move. Just as she was about to be crushed under the dragon's feet, a large hand firmly grabbed her ankle. The owner of the hand told Nicola not to move while speaking words she couldn't understand, seemingly about a safe zone. Nicola had no choice but to pray to the heavens. Not only was the girl scared, but the large hand holding her was also trembling. Fortunately, they were very lucky. The Homo dragons actually ignored them until the group had gone far away. It was only then that the owner of the hand appeared. Haga was covered in camouflage weeds and was very sturdy, but soon Nicola noticed a discrepancy. Compared to the man's sturdy physique, her savior's personality seemed quite weak. Later, Nicola was taken by Haga to a tent where he kindly bandaged her ankle. All this made Nicola very curious about the man's identity. She gathered her courage to ask his name, but received only a vague answer. He said he was here to observe the dragons up close. Nicola had never heard of such a job. Before she could ask more, another massive vibration interrupted her. When the two emerged, they discovered that the Homo dragon had returned. Stranger still, the dragon was continuously ramming into the mountain. Haga, seeing this for the first time, quickly took out a piece of paper and began to record, muttering some strange phrases about a monster stuck here. The next day, Nicola, who works at an inn, inquired about the man's identity, and soon she got her answer. The elderly villagers told her that such people are known as the King Seekers, a direct unit under the king. Their duty is to travel around recording various anomalies, and each of them is one in 10,000 elites. Hearing what the villagers said, Nicola recalled the man's appearance. That appearance didn't look like an elite at all. After Nicola returned to the tent again, she found the man intently recording something. He then took out an old slate and placed a piece of paper on top of it. After uttering the word teleport, the slate emitted a dazzling light. This unprecedented scene made Nicola believe that this was the legendary magic. At the same time, she became even more convinced that Haga was no ordinary person. Because she was watching too intently, Nicola accidentally made a noise, which startled the man. Nicola quickly apologized and explained that she had come to repay his kindness, bringing with her homemade meat soup. Gradually, the two of them grew more familiar. Nicola had never left the village, and they talked about the outside world. Time flew by, and it was evening before they knew it. Suddenly, the vibrations appeared again, as if the dragon tribe was attacking once more. Haga started speaking in strange phrases again, saying, "I got so caught up in our conversation that I forgot the time." It seemed that Haga had known that the dragon tribe would attack the village. He instructed Nicola to immediately go back to the village and tell the villagers to seek refuge. Nicola had no choice but to follow Haga's instructions. Soon after, she informed all the villagers. Fortunately, the villagers were very simple and did not doubt the girl's words. They went to a distant cliff for refuge. At that moment, the male protagonist appeared, facing the giant dragon with a bow in hand. The villagers thought he would perform some impressive move, but the next scene baffled them. The protagonist shot an arrow, but it had no effect on the giant dragon. Then, unbelievably, he threw a barrel of explosives off the cliff. As the dragon roared in fright, the protagonist calmly shot another arrow, followed by another barrel drop. He repeated these simple actions, and even the villagers began to discuss this unadorned combo. After 2.5 hours, the protagonist had still not killed the giant dragon, and the explosives were placed farther and farther away. At this rate, they couldn't harm the dragon. Suddenly, Nicola's voice interrupted the protagonist's thoughts. She had gathered the villagers, and each of them carried a barrel of explosives. With the villagers' help, the protagonist finally managed to defeat the dragon by scraping. The residents celebrated joyfully, but the protagonist remained expressionless. At that moment, Nicola approached the protagonist. The scene of him fighting the dragon alone was deeply etched in her mind. She firmly requested to accompany him, but he decisively refused her request. The next moment, the girl spontaneously combusted, but Haga remained indifferent. He could only helplessly apologize. The village could not escape a total reduction to ashes. Then, one by one, the villagers also began to burn. Haga kept talking to himself in words Nicola couldn't understand. It turned out that Haga's real job was to investigate glitches in the game and then report them, essentially working as a debugger. He watched helplessly as his hands trembled and looked at the ashes left from the girl's combustion. It turned out that this world wasn't real. It was all just a game. King's Quester Online, a fully immersive VR game. The protagonist and his 4 friends, as testers, were allowed early access to test the game. Their task was to identify and report any unresolved bugs in the game. Initially, everyone was excited when they entered the game, but soon they could no longer feel joyful. Living in this place, they seemed unable to perceive the concept of time. Worse still, they accidentally discovered that they couldn't exit the game. About a year passed, and only the timid protagonist remained unharmed. He firmly believed that by diligently working and continuously reporting game bugs, he would eventually be able to leave the game. One day, hearing some noise outside, he took a candle to investigate, thinking it might be one of his former companions. To his surprise, it was Nicola. But who was the little girl who combusted earlier? Could she also be a glitch? When programmers are trapped in the game world, do you know the crazy things they can do? Some conduct inhumane experiments on NPCs, while others go to the extreme of spending the night with 100 female NPCs at once. Trapped in the game for a year, many programmers forgot their duty to check for bugs and started using admin privileges to live like emperors in this game world. However, Haga was the exception. Practical as ever, he worked diligently throughout the year and uploaded the game glitches he found to headquarters, believing that one day this would help him return to the real world. But unexpectedly, an NPC from a beginner's village encountered a bug that gave it self-awareness and even asked Haga to teach it about the world. After 2.5 days of travel, they arrived at a town. As soon as they entered, Nicola, the NPC, was baffled by Haga's actions. Haga was running back and forth with his face against a wall and even started hitting the wall in various positions. The fans watching were dumbfounded. Upon inquiry, they learned that Haga was checking for cracks in the wall, a common bug in games known as the wall glitch. Although Nicola didn't fully understand what Haga was talking about, she earnestly began to mimic him. However, to other NPCs, they just looked like 2 fools with nothing better to do. The 2 ran around the town until the afternoon, fortunately finding no bugs. Nicola thought they could finally rest, but Haga expressed that checking only once was risky, and that they needed to do it again. After finally finishing the second round, Haga noticed Nicola's face turning dark. He thought it was due to the workload, but to his surprise, Nicola found the day too enjoyable. She was being exploited as free labor yet could still smile about it, embodying the true spirit of a working saint. Just as Haga was about to share more about his companion, 2 other programmers approached them. After confirming Haga was a fellow programmer, the mischievous Sakai greeted Haga with a knife, stating this was his way of saying hello. Realizing they meant harm, Haga immediately detonated a smoke bomb in front of him and used the smoke to escape with Nicola. They then hid in a special room where, according to game rules, once locked from the inside, no one outside could enter by any means. Haga's injury wasn't serious. A sip of the recovery potion he carried healed him instantly. But as Haga pondered their next move, unexpectedly, Sakai and his accomplice exploited admin privileges to activate wall clipping mode. Seeing this, Haga was furious. Admin privileges were meant to be used only when necessary. Otherwise, they couldn't inspect game glitches as players. Moreover, abusing admin privileges could lead to numerous bugs. Hearing Haga's earnest complaints, Sakai laughed. As a programmer, he understood this well. But now that they were all trapped in the game world during an extraordinary time, He argued that using admin privileges to make their lives easier wasn't wrong, especially after seeing that Haga had a young girl with him. Sakai was taken aback, unable to believe that the seemingly honest Haga had such inclinations. Just as Haga was confused, Sakai explained that in these unique circumstances, programmers should help each other by sharing the intelligence they had gathered. He then invited Haga to join his organization, pointing out that since they had resolved to never return to the real world, their days were even more enjoyable than an emperor's. Daily, they only needed to think about amusing themselves with NPCs and trying out various things, such as one member of their group who enjoyed a harem lifestyle with 3,000 beauties. After understanding what Sakai's organization was involved in, Haga firmly refused to join. He wanted to stick to his original intention of continuing to check for game glitches. Seeing this, the armored man lost his patience and planned to use force to take Haga away. What he didn't know was that Haga had already maximized his escape talents. However, the armored man, having activated a mode with no cooldowns, was even faster. Just as he was about to catch up, Haga had no choice but to take Nicola and head to a room on the edge of the map. Now, he had to take a gamble. At that moment, the armored man, completely blinded by the thrill of victory, overlooked that the map's edges were the most likely places for wall glitches. So I really have to check this, Haga thought. And it was during the armored man's attempt to phase through the wall that Haga seized the opportunity to take control of his admin system. As the armored man fell, Sakai decided to flee, knowing all too well that falling into an unmodeled area could result in endless repeats of falling from great heights. Thus, Sakai planned to first send the information back to his organization. Meanwhile, Haga, now with Nicola, decided to hide until morning and set off for a certain relic the next day. A year after everyone was trapped in the game world, some programmers had abandoned their original duties and started using their admin privileges to live like emperors, treating many NPCs as tools for amusement. Yet, in this mad game world, Haga remained honest and diligent, checking for glitches and reporting them to the outside world. However, after a year of effort, new glitches appeared daily, and no matter how hard he tried, it felt like a drop in the bucket. Thus, he changed his mind and decided to complete the game world in search of a way back to the real world, starting with a relic. Although the design of this dungeon meant that underworld creatures would attack every few steps, Haga, as a programmer, was all too familiar with this. He could complete the dungeon even with his eyes closed. However, he forgot that Nicola was just a little girl. In a moment of inattention, Nicola was distracted by coins on the ground, thinking that picking them up would earn Haga's praise. Unbeknownst to her, she was surrounded by coin monsters and soon fell into a deep sleep. At this time, Haga, focused on making progress, realized that Nicola had disappeared. Inside a mysterious room, the coin monsters placed Nicola on an altar, accompanied by a strange sacrificial chant. A 5-fingered creature with a human face emerged from the lake, ready to devour Nicola the next second. Fortunately, Haga arrived just in time to save her. Knowing the creature's weaknesses, Haga defeated it in just a few rounds. As for the remaining coin monsters, they only needed a push into the lake with a wooden stick to be instantly killed. After this incident, Nicola realized that she had been too reckless. She was curious about the companions Haga had mentioned earlier. Upon hearing her question, Haga pointed directly at the ground. Nicola looked back and was almost scared silly. She had never imagined that Haga's companion would be embedded in the ground. At that moment, Haga explained that this person had accidentally gotten stuck in the ground during a teleportation, and for some unknown reason, continued to slowly sink. Nearby, another companion was caught in an invincibility bug, constantly dying and reviving in a lethal area. Haga had tried many methods to rescue them, but neither pulling nor using items worked. Speaking of this, Haga couldn't help but recall a year ago when 5 programmers, including himself, entered the game world to check for glitches. Each had access to an admin system, which they agreed not to use unless absolutely necessary. Initially, everyone was happy to share their work daily, but this relaxed life did not last long. One day, they suddenly discovered they could not log out of the game, and even sending messages to the outside world made no difference. From that day on, 3 companions decided to give up and began using their admin rights indiscriminately. Soon, accidents occurred, and these 3 suffered from bugs caused by their misuse of admin rights. This is why Haga was determined not to use his admin privileges. To change the situation, Haga and the last remaining companion decided to act separately. The companion tried to complete the game, while Haga continued to upload bugs and find a way to rescue people. But after a year with no progress, Haga planned to advance the game's plot like his companion. However, just as he was about to depart, Nicola suddenly started fumbling on Haga, taking 2 tablets that held admin rights from him. Shockingly, with these tablets, Nicola could jump 10 meters high with a single leap and even demanded that Haga cook immediately. Thinking this was another bug, Haga started cooking after leaving the relic, but he noticed that Nicola's appetite was unusually large and her personality did not match her original settings. With suspicion, Haga tentatively asked her a question, and the response came from the universal AI, Tesla, who had taken over Nicola's body. It turned out there are 3 types of AI in this game world: character AIs like Nicola, navigation AIs that manage terrain data, and the universal AI, Tesla, that oversees the entire game. Tesla had chosen Nicola because she was the NPC closest to Haga, which would be helpful for her plans later. At this moment, Haga finally understood why Nicola had bugs and developed self-awareness. It was all Tesla's doing. Tesla's goal was simple: to drive out programmers who misused their admin rights. More precisely, to confiscate their admin privileges to prevent more bugs. Since Haga was honest and had never misused his admin rights for ill purposes, Tesla returned his tablets, allowing him to continue his normal work to aid in her task of reclaiming rights. But this confused Haga. If Tesla was the AI of the world, why didn't she intervene directly? Tesla expressed regret about this. Although she was the highest level AI in this world, she did not have the authority to directly interfere with players. By herself, it was nearly impossible to complete this task. Therefore, she had no choice but to rely on Haga, the most pragmatic programmer. After saying this, Tesla left Nicola's body. At this moment, Nicola was full of questions, not knowing why she was here. Thus, Haga, tasked with this sudden responsibility, continued on his journey with Nicola. Unexpectedly, on their way, they encountered a village not on the game map. More bizarrely, the villagers could float in midair. Haga could never have imagined that all this was caused by a rabbit. Every villager maintained a T-pose, and not just the humans. Even the animals did the same. This was due to a bug in the game world. The villagers were modeled but lacked motion modules, which is why they appeared to float when walking. As a debugger, Haga's job was to report these anomalies to the outside world. That day, Haga and Nicola tallied all the NPCs with bugs in the village, and by evening, they sent the bug data to the development team. Overnight, the developers fixed the issues, and the villagers were updated with motion modules. However, to Haga's surprise, a rabbit named Amano still maintained the T-pose. Assuming Amano was an NPC they missed yesterday, they were shocked when Amano saw them, cast an invisibility spell, and left nonchalantly. However, Haga knew that invisibility spells had a flaw. They couldn't hide footprints. Amano's actions likely indicated he was also a programmer. Haga immediately followed with Nicola, and after 2.5 minutes they found the end of the footprints at a small house. Inside, besides a side quest NPC, Haga was more interested in special papers in the room, obviously papers used by programmers to report bugs, but now they were covered in comic drawings. Before Haga could ask about the origin of the comics, a small knife suddenly attacked them. The earlier Amano had taken Nicola hostage with the knife. It turned out he was a programmer who had escaped from a large organization because he didn't want to be manipulated anymore. Fortunately, after some communication, their misunderstanding was cleared up. Realizing Amano was not from the organization, Haga immediately invited him to join in fixing the bugs of the game world. But Amano decisively refused because his heart already belonged to a woman named Rue. Rue was originally an NPC who listened to players' stories. Unexpectedly, after seeing Amano's comics, she gave them a favorable review. This was the first time Amano received affirmation from someone. Hence, he settled down there, dedicating himself to drawing comics, dreaming of leaving the game world one day to become a real comic artist. However, as they discussed their future, the house suddenly shook violently. The next second, the whole house collapsed. It turned out the guild leader had come after Haga and Nicola and directly controlled a dragon to destroy the entire village. At this time, Haga relied on his high health to endure the rubble. On the other hand, Sakai, seeing no trace of Haga, immediately left the place with the guild leader. To them, NPCs were just toys to be killed at will. When Amano found Rue again, he discovered she was trapped under the ruins. Amano thought about using a healing potion to revive Rue to full health, but unexpectedly, when Haga removed the rubble, Rue had transformed into a legendary sorcerer. In this situation, potions couldn't restore her, and once NPCs died here, they couldn't be revived. After tearfully saying goodbye to his friend, Amano chose to turn completely dark. Programmer Haga never imagined that there could be a real-world version of the Carnage Stick in the game world. He thought it was some special torture tool, but to his surprise, there was a whole box of these sticks. The naive female protagonist even swung it around like a precious sword. Just 2.5 days earlier, with the new team member Amano joining, Haga and his team decided to fix the bugs in the Royal City, and also to look for other programmers abusing admin rights. However, the president and others had held a competition to massacre NPCs, which completely changed the appearance of the Royal City now. Many soldiers died in traps set by the opponents, and the only road to the Royal City was also broken. Amano suggested using admin rights to fly over in sky mode, but Haga was incredibly conflicted. He didn't want to use admin privileges. After thinking for 2.5 minutes, Haga moved a treasure chest to the top of a tower, then punched it fiercely. He intended to use the chest's properties to reach the Royal City, because depending on the force used to hit the chest, the speed at which it opened could vary. So, after 9 punches, Haga immediately grabbed the 2 and climbed on top of the chest, and soon the chest burst open. Using this force, the 3 of them took off right there, speeding towards the Royal City. Thus, under Haga's high health cover, Amano and Nicola landed without a scratch, while Haga instantly recovered full health using his potions. Afterward, the 3 went through a guard check, officially triggering the game's storyline. They were captured by soldiers and taken as heretics, but this was too much for Nicola. Being an NPC, she genuinely didn't know this was part of the game plot, and she kept shouting about the injustice. While in jail, Haga also received a new mission notification. That was to escape from this prison. Soon, Haga found a way out. A wall in the cell was destructible. As the 3 escaped from the jail, their mission updated to defeating the guard captain, clearly a boss from the name. On their way forward, they came to a torture chamber, a room not only spacious, but also filled with various usable props. Haga instantly realized this was the battlefield for the boss fight. However, while they were selecting appropriate weapons, Nicola suddenly took out an indescribable object. She swung it around, and looking at this purple tool, both Haga and Amano were shocked. This was not an 18+ game. How could such explicit items appear? Before they could ponder whether this was a bug or someone's intentional doing, they understood they must quickly report the situation to headquarters. It was then that the suspected boss, the guard captain, finally appeared, but strangely, he looked more like a monster than a human. This character's appearance completely contradicts the game's settings, and to Haga's surprise, this boss spewed nothing but obscenities.